Picture for a moment a world-class theater, an institution that stands as a shining symbol of national unity and creative aspiration, suddenly thrust into the heart of a raging cultural and political tempest. The Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. has long been more than just a building of grand halls and velvet curtains. For over half a century, it has been the beating heart of America's artistic ambitions, a living memorial to President John F. Kennedy's enduring vision of a nation enriched by culture. But now, under the glare of presidential spotlights and amid a storm of divided cheers and jeers, the Kennedy Center finds itself at the epicenter of a struggle that could reshape the future of the American arts, perhaps even the nation's very soul. Since its opening in the early 1970s, the Kennedy Center has embodied the idea that art is for everyone. On its stages, the boundaries of creativity have been pushed and dissolved, featuring everything from groundbreaking hip-hop musicals and thought-provoking drag performances to world-class symphony concerts and grassroots community workshops. The center has been a place where the most dazzling talents, regardless of their background, orientation, or beliefs, could find a home, echoing the pluralism and inclusivity that President Kennedy dreamed of. Federal funding, including the hundreds of millions of dollars allocated annually by the National Endowment for the Arts, has supported this mission, enabling the Kennedy Center to keep ticket prices accessible and programming diverse. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Kennedy Center has been a lighthouse for artistic freedom, shining its beacon far beyond the banks of the Potomac. Yet, as history so often reminds us, even the brightest beacons can be threatened by storms. And today, the Kennedy Center is facing a tempest unlike any before. In January of this year, former President Donald Trump returned to office and moved swiftly to consolidate his influence over the country's cultural flagship. Within days, he installed himself as chairman, dismissed long-standing board members, and replaced them with a cadre of trusted loyalists. For many in the arts community, this act was more than a political maneuver. It was a direct challenge to the independence of American culture itself. The fear was not simply that one man would dictate the programming of a theater, but that the entire fabric of artistic freedom might be unraveled, thread by thread. The reaction from within and beyond Washington's artistic circles was electric. Ticket sales for the upcoming season nosedived, plunging by more than one-third, a figure that translates into many millions of dollars lost and countless empty seats. Renowned performers, including stars from the revolutionary musical Hamilton, withdrew from their scheduled shows in open protest. Behind the scenes, the Kennedy Center's once vibrant social impact program, an initiative focused on diversity, outreach, and community engagement, was abruptly dismantled. Drag performances, which had become a celebrated feature of the institution's programming, were banned overnight, sending a chilling message to marginalized artists and audiences alike. The atmosphere came to a head during the opening night of Les Miserables, a musical whose very themes of rebellion, injustice, and the yearning for liberty seemed to mirror the real-life drama unfolding on stage and off. When President Trump and First Lady Melania appeared on the central balcony, illuminated by the presidential seal, the reaction from the audience was instantaneous and deeply divided. Some erupted into chants of USA, USA, while others responded with a wave of boos and vocal dissent. Several cast members, unwilling to perform under the new regime, participated in a boycott, adding another layer of symbolism to a night already thick with meaning. Observers nationwide seized on the irony. Peter Loge, director of George Washington University's School of Media and Public Affairs, wryly remarked, "I think the irony is probably lost on him," alluding to the story of Les Miserables as a tale of rebels versus unjust rulers. California's Governor Gavin Newsom took to social media, imploring someone to explain the plot to him. It was more than just a performance. It was a cultural flashpoint, a moment in which art and politics collided on the most public of stages. But the consequences of this upheaval are rippling far beyond the Kennedy Center's gilded halls. The institution, once a sanctuary for creative risk-taking and free expression, has become a litmus test for the nation's commitment to artistic independence. Over 90 employees, fearing for their livelihoods and the integrity of the center, have launched a unionization drive. The Smithsonian Institution, under whose umbrella the Kennedy Center operates, has begun a discreet yet thorough review of the center's operational autonomy. Meanwhile, federal investigators are probing whether taxpayer dollars, intended to support a broad and inclusive spectrum of art, are now being funneled into a narrower, more partisan agenda. This controversy is not happening in isolation. Recent changes on the national stage reveal a tidal shift in the relationship between government and the arts. The National Endowment for the Arts, whose funding exceeded $200 million in the last fiscal year, has rolled back requirements that once protected artistic expression from political interference, such as the stipulation that grant recipients not be penalized for promoting gender ideology. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis's veto of arts and culture grants has set a worrying precedent, exposing the vulnerability of cultural funding to political wins. These actions, taken together, suggest that the Kennedy Center's crisis may be a harbinger of broader struggles to come. The economic impact is impossible to ignore. The center's 36% drop in ticket sales for the 2025 to 2026 season represents more than just numbers on a balance sheet. It is a sign of public disapproval and a warning to other cultural institutions. When artists and audiences withdraw their support, the result is not only a loss of revenue but also a shrinking of the artistic ecosystem itself. Dozens of artists from across genres, including those associated with trailblazing works like Hamilton, have walked away, refusing to lend their voices to a stage they see as compromised. For marginalized communities, the abrupt end of initiatives like the Social Impact Program and the banning of drag performances feel like the closing of doors that had only recently been opened. World Pride, one of the globe's largest celebrations of LGBTQ+ culture, was set to host major events at the Kennedy Center in 2025. In response to the new administration's policies, organizers have pulled those events, citing a newly hostile atmosphere. This move is more than symbolic. It signals to international observers that America's leading cultural institutions may no longer be safe spaces for diverse voices and perspectives. As one organizer put it, we cannot celebrate pride in a place where diversity is not truly welcome. So, what is really at stake? The battle over the Kennedy Center is about more than the fate of a single venue or even a single art form. It is about the very nature of public spaces in a democracy. Will these spaces remain open to all, fostering dialogue, empathy, and mutual understanding? Or will they become battlegrounds, where only approved narratives are allowed and dissent is silenced? Experts warn of a chilling effect that could reach far beyond Washington. Robert Lynch, president of Americans for the Arts, states emphatically, "Public funding for the arts is a sound investment with significant returns for society, not just for artists but for communities, economies, and the nation's spirit." Yet, as political interference intensifies, the fear is that smaller theaters, museums, and festivals across the country will feel compelled to self-censor or risk losing essential grants. The chain reaction could be devastating: less diversity of thought, fewer opportunities for artists from underrepresented backgrounds, and a general narrowing of the artistic spectrum. This is not a new story. It is a recurring chapter in history. Throughout the 20th century, artists and cultural leaders have faced censorship and political pressure, from the Hollywood blacklist of the 1950s to the battles over government funding for controversial art in the 1980s and 90s. Each time, the outcome has depended on the willingness of artists, audiences, and advocates to stand up for freedom of expression. Yet, in adversity, there is also opportunity. The backlash against the Kennedy Center's new direction has already sparked a surge of grassroots creativity. Across the nation, artists are building new networks, digital platforms, pop-up performance spaces, and local collectives, where independent voices can flourish beyond the reach of institutional control. Crowdfunding campaigns and community-driven fundraising are emerging as powerful tools, allowing the public to directly support the kind of art they value. In some cities, new partnerships are forming between local governments, businesses, and artists to create alternative venues and ensure that creative expression endures, even in the face of official hostility. Consider the example of the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, when African American artists, shut out of mainstream institutions, created their own vibrant cultural movement that reshaped American literature, music, and art. Or think of the underground theater movements in Eastern Europe during the Cold War, where artists defied state censorship to stage works that challenged the status quo. These historical parallels remind us that creative energy cannot be easily extinguished. It finds new channels and unexpected allies. But let us not romanticize resistance. The risks are real and growing. The Kennedy Center's rapid decline in ticket sales and the mass departure of artists are not just temporary setbacks. They are warning signs of an ecosystem under threat. When diversity initiatives vanish and marginalized voices are silenced, the entire cultural landscape becomes poorer, less innovative, and less reflective of the nation's true character. So, what can be done? The answer begins with each of us. As citizens, we have a stake in the arts. not just as consumers of entertainment, but as participants in a shared cultural journey. Supporting local arts organizations, attending performances, and donating, even small amounts, can help sustain independent creativity. Most importantly, speaking out against censorship and partisan overreach sends a clear message. Artistic freedom matters, and it must be defended. Robert Lynch puts it plainly: public funding for the arts is not a luxury, it is an investment with proven returns for the community. The data backs this up. Studies consistently show that every dollar invested in the arts generates multiple dollars in economic activity, supports jobs, and strengthens civic engagement. Artistic programs in schools have been linked to higher academic achievement, greater empathy, and improved social cohesion. The benefits are not abstract. They are measurable, tangible, and deeply felt in communities across the nation. There are also lessons to be learned from abroad. In countries where arts funding is robust and shielded from political interference, such as Germany, Canada, and the Scandinavian nations, the cultural sector is not only more stable, but also more innovative and inclusive. These societies recognize that a thriving arts ecosystem is essential for democracy, economic vitality, and social progress. America, too, can choose this path, but it requires vigilance and collective action. If the Kennedy Center, once the crown jewel of American culture, can be so swiftly transformed by political forces, then no institution is truly immune. The struggle is not just for the future of one theater, but for the principles of openness, pluralism, and creative freedom that define a healthy society. This is not an inevitable new normal, unless the public allows it to be. A lesser-known chapter of the Kennedy Center's history offers a ray of hope. When the center first opened its doors in 1971, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis called it a living memorial to the arts and freedom. She envisioned a place where artists of every background could come together in a spirit of innovation and mutual respect, a vision that still resonates today. That legacy now belongs to all of us, not just as spectators, but as stewards. So, what will you do? The next act in this unfolding story depends on the choices made by ordinary people, by those who attend performances, support local artists, write letters to elected officials, and refuse to accept a narrowing of the creative horizon. If you believe, as President Kennedy did, that the arts have the power to inspire, unite, and challenge us, then now is the time to raise your voice. Subscribe for more stories at the crossroads of economics, politics, and technology. Let's work together to keep the spotlight shining on freedom, innovation, and the enduring power of the arts. The stage is set, the lights are up, and the future is waiting.